Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I'm the lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host, or in this case, co-hosts, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is twofold. We're going to explore the technical architect career path and the road to certified technical architect, which is the pinnacle of Salesforce certification achievement. So if you're on the path to becoming a CTA or certified technical architect, or if you're interested in the technical architect career path and what it entails, this is the session for you. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our co-hosts for tonight's session. Anuj Sharma, Bibhu Pati, and Swapnil Borkar should be here shortly. Anuj is a 14-time certified senior technical architect at Salesforce with over 15 years of consulting experience. Bibhu is a certified technical architect and a 32 times certified senior program architect at Salesforce. And Swapnil is a program architect at Salesforce with over 16 years of SAP and Salesforce CRM experience. He has 16 certifications in Salesforce, 3 in Capado, and is Health Cloud Professional Certified. So it goes without saying, there's a wealth of talent present in our virtual room tonight. It is great to have you all hosting Office Hours with me. Welcome. If you would each share your professional story in a bit more detail, that would be great. Anuj, do you want to get started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Really happy to be part of this session to share my knowledge. So I would share my story. So basically, as you can make out from my language, I'm from South Asia, India. I'm a military kid in myself. So my father is from defense in India. So especially I'm excited about this session. But yes, I think I started my journey in 2006 after my graduation. And as you know, freshers are beggars. So that means whatever I've been given, I started working there, right? So whichever technology, I got to work in, there was an old technology called Power Builder at that time. So started working in there, gradually started learning to understand how enterprise application works, what is the system and things like that. But I knew one thing, that I have to change I have to go to a new technology, because this technology was functioning, but it was getting old and it is sort of dying down. So I keep learning new things, new areas. And gradually I got to know in 2009 about Salesforce, which is like cloud computing is coming into picture. I started learning myself. So there was no training sessions or nothing at that time. Get it myself certified. And from there, my journey into Salesforce started. I then become a developer, senior developer, run various roles, manager, and gradually I have been started working in different consulting companies, Accenture, IBM, been to various locations. I've been in Germany for a few years. Then I was in US after that. So, I mean, it was a good journey till now, but with Salesforce, it's a big, I can say, area. So, and we are ever expanding. So I'm still learning, not just technically, but functionally as well, and overall thing. So that's my brief background, how I been here professionally and what I'm working on. Based out of New Jersey, live with my wife and 2 daughters.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Anuj. It just goes to show, no matter how many certifications somebody has, you're always still learning, and that's kind of the whole point. In fact, I think that the more I learn, the more I want to learn more. So if you're monitoring chat, I did post the links to connect with Anuj, Bibhu, and with Swapnil. And Bibhu, do you want to take over and share your professional journey story?
Sure thing. Thanks, David. And first of all, apologies everyone for my voice. I'm just coming out of a sick break, so I'm still struggling with my voice a bit. But very happy to be in this session and to share my story. Probably completely different from what Anuj said. I come from a different background, like non-IT background, from pharmacy, so which is probably completely different, as you can understand. And I was actually doing sales before even coming into IT, and not even thinking about getting into IT. But destiny happens, and I got invited into an IT company, and yeah, I got enrolled into civil CRM. Did few months of work on civil CRM. Then again, another destiny happened, and I got switched into Salesforce and never looked back. I think it's from 2011. I've never looked back, and as everyone's saying, it's plethora of things that you need to learn within Salesforce. And from the day dot, I think it came across so easy. I always found it interesting to learn new things, and especially for somebody like me, like coming from no IT background, and learning was so easy. Yes, the trailheads were not there, but then there were enough content were available online, and then the community itself, everybody was helping each other, answering each other's questions. And then I followed up, like mostly I followed a consultant path. So it's mostly functional roles. I started with talking to clients, doing business analyst role, doing requirement gathering. Then eventually when I got more knowledge, I helped my clients to design the solution. And that path just kind of seamlessly happened without a conscious effort of doing it. It just happened because I have been put in positions where I have to do all those things. And yeah, and then eventually it grew. I was also in Germany for a few years before coming to Australia and loved Australia. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to leave Australia anymore. So currently I'm in Melbourne, where and I'm working with Salesforce, as you already have known it, enjoying the life now. And as David said, learning never stops. So even the journey of whatever certification you do, it's not about the certification. It's about like learning new contents, because Salesforce is not stopping either.
It never slows down. No, thanks very much for sharing that with us, Bibhu. And it just goes to show, like, not only do we have folks that have a ton of experience and certifications, but it's across a wide variety of industries. So if you want to dig down into a specific industry that either Anuj or Bibhu mentioned, please feel free to do so. So thanks again for volunteering to host the session, guys. What I'd like to do now is for those that are joining for the first time, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of office hours, kind of before we open the floor for questions and discussion. So if this is your first time, welcome. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers as well as allies. Everyone's welcome to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics in order that we, as a collective group, can help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So for this next hour, this is your opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call can speak up and either ask or answer questions from your perspective. Feel free to share your LinkedIn profile links in chat as well, so we can all connect with one another. And I'll also be sharing knowledge articles and various posts that my volunteer team has put together from across the ecosystem. If you want to ask a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to do so. This is your session. So if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, no worries. You can post your questions in chat, and I'll do my best to monitor the chat window as well as hands raised and call on people in order. And then finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you want to share an attribution-free comment, you don't want maybe your boss to know that you've asked about other work opportunities, just let me know before speaking, and I'll make sure that it's edited out of the final recording. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get to the CTA, or Certified Technical Architect path, I wanted to dive into just the architect role in and of itself. As you're probably sitting here thinking, there's numerous different types of architect roles in the ecosystem, which can sometimes be confusing, right? So Bibhu and Anuj, if you could explain the difference between a technical architect and a program architect in terms of job duties and responsibilities, that would be fantastic. And feel free, whoever wants to go first, just launch right in.
Okay, so I can go there. So basically, we in Salesforce, used to have, which was more different, like program architect and technical architect roles, which is now a bit of being merged. But what we mean by program architect and technical architect was, program architect role was specifically for helping the customer understand and use the technology. Like they derive their plan how to use optimally the Salesforce technology. They derive in their system how Salesforce can be used in an optimized way. So basically, they work as a front end for Salesforce implementation for them. So they work as a trusted advisor, more so in their plans, architectures, things like that, in my understanding. Technical architect role is specifically more on towards implementation. So we have a project where we need to, for example, implement our Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, or whatever Post.com banking application. So technical architect role is something to run workshop with the clients, create high-level design documentation, work with the team of developers, and do the end implementation. So that was basically big difference between the program architect and the technical architect role. I can go to Bibhu to provide his understanding on that.
Thanks. I know I pretty much agree to that, but the whole point is, when we are a program architect or technical architect, either way, we're considered as a very trusted advisor. So the whole thing that we look for is what is actually best for the customer. So that's the core of either of the roles. The roles distinction, yes, the distinction comes in when, because of the program level, what you're doing is that sometimes we have to be working as an enterprise architect. So you're looking at the entire landscape and giving advices to your client to, okay, how can you sustain that entire ecosystem and what are the good things and what are bad things you should be doing. And program architecture role really requires you to talking to those C-level execs. So that is one of the key distinction that I have seen here. Not that technical architects would not speak, but then as Anuj mentioned, technical architects mostly are on the project implementation side, but program architects would be actually looking into multiple items, like different services that we offer as part of the assurance services. And we really tend to talk to the C-level executives. And don't be afraid. Like, we would not have any fear of telling, like, okay, this is not going to work. It's like having no fear and having that kind of distinction. I think that is the main distinction. Yes, there are some areas where, as a program architect, also we might have to look into the details of the technical sides and then give advices. But technical architect is usually associated to a particular project implementation rather than program architect, which is overall. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. So it's a question of, like, from what I understand, scope. You know, what's the scope of
Yeah.
the problems that you're looking at? Is it project related, or is it more overarching a particular program? So that's interesting. I appreciate painting that distinction. And just a quick follow-up question. So, you know, one of the reasons why we do these sessions is because it allows trailblazers of all experience levels to kind of put themselves in the shoes of the people that have been invited to share their experiences and maybe imagine themselves in these roles in the future. And so with that in mind, what experience and training requirements would someone need to be competitive in applying for each type of role? Obviously, there's a certification component, but, you know, there's obviously also a work experience component. So if you could go into that a little bit to paint that picture for kind of a path to get from maybe where someone is starting out in the ecosystem to where you are, which is kind of at the pinnacle of Salesforce knowledge. Obviously, always still learning, but you're the trusted advisor to multiple different clients. How do you get there?
Yeah, I think so. From a starting point, when you have no knowledge and then you're getting into the ecosystem, the best part of the ecosystem, as you guys probably know, is one of the example is this: having this kind of discussion, having an awareness of, okay, what I could do, what I don't need to do, is something also helpful. And you probably know, like, so much of content on Trailheads, and then there's so many guided paths there. But to be an architect, yes, you do need to look at this path, like, of certification, because that has been designed in a way that you gather the knowledge slowly, bite sizes, and then you actually reach the level that you want to. But it's all about getting that mindset into your kind of body or into your mind that you are working as an architect. It doesn't have to be a designation which would define your work. At least that is what I did. Like, when I started as a functional consultant, I would not always just think about the part of the problem at that point of time. I would always try to see, okay, what is the holistic view of the business? How does this business operates? What are the different key points where customer is touching? And if I design something, how can this particular customer keep that design for next future, kind of foreseeable future? If you're not thinking in that line, I think that is one of the key things. Doesn't matter which area of IT you're coming from. Even if you're not coming from an IT background, having an appetite to show that kind of a behavior is very important to becoming an architect. But yes, as I don't have to tell you what are the different certifications that you have to do, because all those things are available on Trailheads. And there is obviously a very good packaged path which we can go from one step to the other step.
Totally. Just to add, and most of the time when I talk with some of the juniors or people who are trying to join, even in my knowns, there was a blockage in the mind, like, okay, technical side, developer, what it means, or admin is easy. I think this should not be, it is not something very hard. It's more a logical, like, if you think logically how a business should function, like how it should work, I think then from there onwards, you will understand things. Technology is more on syntax, so you will learn it as you start looking at those. So I don't think there is a very complex or a very difficult path once you identify yourself as, okay, this is the place I should put my focus on, and then gradually you can go on. So first thing is, don't feel like something is admin is easy or technical side is difficult. It's up to what fields what takes your interest, and I think both is doable, and I mean once you start working towards it.
Yeah, thank you, Anuj and Bibhu. And I'm going to call on Adam, who's a program architect. Adam, you have the floor.
Hey, yes, another program architect. A wealth of information here. David, I've popped you a PDF called Think Like an Architect. If you can get that asset and share it with the folks here. You know, sometimes it's kind of hard to, work out what that step is. That particular presentation is all about how to think like an architect. So instead of just looking at the how, I'm always thinking about the why, the business value. And so, yeah, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I appreciate the added clarity. I think what I took away from that is you can be an architect independent of your job title, right? So you don't have to be labeled program architect or technical architect to be performing some of the work for that job. I think to Bibhu's point, first think like an architect. And over time, if you're thinking in that way, it's going to follow that you'll eventually become that. And then to Anuj's point, business knowledge is just as important as the technical side. And in fact, if you have a good business knowledge to build a foundation upon, the technical skills can come at the same time or later. Craig, you have a question or comment?
Thanks, David. What I was curious about is what is the journey through the different stages and what different skill sets, what attitude changes, or mindset changes have the architects gone through to get to where they are today?
Yeah, great question. I definitely have some thoughts on that, but I'll turn it over to our panel first.
So Craig, I think it depends on roles. So when you start, just look at the assignment or work you have given. So you don't look, so you start with a specific small domain thing. But gradually, when you start get more responsibility or you start understanding the technology or the application, you start moving on ahead, like understanding how it will work. So when you become a lead or like a senior developer, you get more aware of how it should start assembling or working towards. So you gain that understanding. When you become technical architect, you start designing those things. So other than you know how to implement those things, you know how to design what are the issues you will get beforehand so that you can don't fall out on those. So I think it is a gradual process. And as you start working from bottoms up, you gradually understand and get those learning. That's my understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely, I agree to Anuj. I think it's always when you are starting from like you don't have any knowledge of how you're entering into Salesforce ecosystem or architecting or anything like that. I, as in personally also, when I entered, I never thought about being an architect. I just started as a consultant, plain consultant. There are obviously so many options of, it's a step-by-step process, right? It's as they say, it's a ladder that you're going onto the top of the ladder or wherever you want to fit in yourself. From day dot, I don't know if how many people would have clarity that, okay, I want to be a CTA, I want to be a technical architect, or I want to be a program architect. Having that particular situation probably would be very rare unless you're coming from the thorough experience of 10 years, you have worked with SAP or Oracle, and you know, okay, how the architecture works. So that means you have been acquainted with what are the different types of work in there. But if you're coming from a completely different background and not having an idea, I would suggest take those bite-sized steps, like first small ones, and then once you get into the ecosystem, once you interact with multiple people and having some understanding of what platform does, that will help you form an opinion for yourself. Okay, where do I actually want to go? Not everyone wants to be an architect. I've known people though are really, really good developers and they're now 50 plus or 60, like whatever the age, it doesn't matter, but they're still doing that because they love it, because they're passionate about it. So everybody doesn't need to be an architect, right? So you can go get it, understand, and then set your goal for next, let's say, couple of years or how many months or whichever works for you. I hope that answers, Craig, your question. If I can give an example, if you're building something with the Lego, so you have to have those understanding of where the small building blocks are actually going to fit in, where it will fit in properly, right? So once you understand that, then you can take a kind of a vision that, okay, I want to build this particular model with this Lego. So I know what are the different models do so that I know where to fit them so that it can have a proper structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so great points. And I just want to piggyback on what Anuj and Bibhu were mentioning, which is you got to start somewhere, right? So you build these foundational skills and you layer them on top of each other as you progress throughout your career. To Bibhu's point, you don't know what you don't know. And so I'll give you kind of an example from my perspective. When I was originally transitioning to the ecosystem and was brand new, had no tech experience, I thought I wanted to be an administrator, right? Because that's what everyone's told. Hey, be an admin. And it's a phenomenal role. So I got some trailheads under my belt. I volunteered at a nonprofit to be their administrator. And after doing it for about 10 months, while it's fantastic, it wasn't for me, right? And I never would have known that had I not taken on the role. But I was able to kind of test drive the role. And so at that point, it became clear that I wanted to be a consultant, right? So I transitioned from the military and I get hired as a consultant. And the difference, Craig, is obviously like as an admin, you're in charge with maintaining one or more Salesforce instances. So you're doing the day-to-day, right? You're fixing things when they break, you're answering support tickets, you're creating reports, you're installing packages, you're making sure everything's up and running and humming. As a consultant, you're brought in on projects to do implementations. So, company X is like, hey, I want you to build me Sales Cloud and throw in some Experience Cloud and some Service Cloud too. So you engage in a 8 to 12 month project and you roll out Salesforce for them, and then you're on to the next project. And so the difference there is you get access to a lot more different, interesting problem sets in your life as a consultant, because you're not dealing with one instance. You're dealing with, over the course of your career, numerous different instances, numerous different clouds. And so I did that for a year. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. But then I kind of got burnt out. And so then I discovered solution engineering. And that's where I'm at now. And I'm very happy doing that completely different role. But back to the point, you don't know what you don't know. So you got to start somewhere, be an admin, right? Or be a consultant, get some experience under your belt. And then it'll occur to you what you should do next based upon, how well you like that role and what else has come up. And you can make those choices at that point. But to plan out like from the beginning to go, I want to be an admin and then eventually be a CTA, you could say that, but you really don't know until you really get some experience under your belt if that's going to tie in with your needs, your desires, your passions. So just be flexible, I guess is my point.
I think that's also an important point to note here, David, in this call, is that there are so many different opportunities within the ecosystem.
It really is. And so once you figure out what you like, then you can tailor your experience and your job accordingly. And as the Salesforce administrator skills that I learned were a perfect springboard to be a consultant. And the consultant skills that I learned were a perfect springboard to be a solution engineer. And then, in 5 years, the skills that I have now will be a perfect springboard for whatever else I decide to do that I don't even know about yet. So, but yeah, great points. We do have a question in chat from Hannah. And so she's asking, can you compare and contrast the role of solution architect and delivery manager? So Bibhu or Anuj, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And then I think they're quite a different role. So as a solution architect, you are responsible for designing the solution for your client's given problem. So client might have requirements where the customer retention is not happening, and you go into this project and you're looking at, okay, what are the different systems that they have, or what are the different systems they need. From talking from Salesforce point of view, it doesn't have to be all the Salesforce, but then you might have other systems in the ecosystem, right? So having an understanding, okay, how the overall solution would work, and you as a solution architect being present throughout the implementation, most of the part of the implementation, from designing it from the data or having understanding the requirement and going through that and delivering it as part of the team, is a solution architect role. Whereas delivery managers are mostly responsible, as in, again, my experience I'm just talking about, they're mostly responsible for the delivery of the project, not the solution. They're not accountable for the solution. So solution architect is accountable for the solution. Delivery managers are usually responsible for the delivering the project. So that means it's more of a team management, understanding, okay, what are the different things that needs to happen within a project lifecycle, like whether, standard software development life cycles, okay, if there is a testing team, appropriate testing team is there, whether they are doing their job, whether the standard, your developers, consultants, and everybody doing job, and what are the different milestones that you have as a project delivery, whether you're meeting your milestones. It's more of a project management role rather than just delivering the solution. So I hope that makes a differentiation clear. As a solution architect, you would need to know the entire solution landscape more as compared to the delivery manager, I would think.
Great question. And just a couple of quick announcements. So the PDF that Adam was talking about, I've downloaded it, and that'll be available on the YouTube channel as an added resource, so you can link to it there. And then Swapnil just joined the call. He was delayed customer meeting, so he'll be able to weigh in on future questions. All right, so back into the questions here. If you could walk us through what your typical work week looks like. So, what activities do you engage in? What challenges do you have? What's the team and the customer interaction look like? That would be fantastic.
Swapnil, you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, can you guys hear me all right? So, day in a life, right? It depends on what kind of engagement you are in. So, I'm working as a program architect, and I have worked with a client where the scenario is such that I'm doing hands-on work, right? So that's not a typical program architect day in a life, right? You're not doing hands-on coding or anything, but I have done that as a program architect as well. So you have to just take what kind of client requirements are and what kind of contract you get assigned to, or SOW basically, right, with the client. But since last 1.5 years, I've been doing purely program architect kind of work, which is basically working with the business as well as IT stakeholders, meeting with them and trying to understand their problems. And they typically assign you a very specific problem, and it could be technical or it could be a non-technical problem. By non-technical problem, I mean, for example, setting up a COE, right? So helping them with governance, basically. Not exactly setting up a COE, but giving them pointers on how to establish a governance. For example, they're having issues with the release management, that they're having a lot of bugs in production, right? So why is that? So they will come to us with this kind of problems, and then we have to go back and analyze what they are doing. How is the release cycle managed, right? What testing they are doing? Do they have enough number of sandboxes? Do they have right kind of test scripts? Do they have automation test scripts and things like that, right? Based on that, then you will go back and provide recommendations to them on the release management, right? So in this use case, I've not done any hands-on work. I'm not gone and set up the Git or Copado or whatever for them. I'm just guiding them. Okay, this is how you will do it. I will take a couple of days or a week to do my research and then present my findings to them in a deck, right? If further, sometimes the client asks, okay, we are stuck in this specific so you have recommended this for us, but we are stuck in this specific thing, like we are not able to set up Git, or we are not able to set up Copado or whatever. Then what I would do is I would go and set it up on my own sandbox and show it to them, right? So I'm not doing any hands-on work with the client. Typically, that's the role of a program architect. You are setting it up on your own sandbox and just presenting them as a proof of concept. I don't want to take any more time, so I mean, that's typically my day, how it looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Swapnil. Thank you for sharing. So it sounds like it's dependent in your case upon the project that you're on and what the customer requirements for that project are. Not always hands-on, which is interesting. Over to you, Bibhu and Anuj.
Yeah, as in just to add on, I think yes, it is very much dependent on the engagement. But as a program architect, again, I'm talking about from my point of view. I'm currently working as an enterprise architect with my customer, because I'm just not a program architect from Salesforce. I'm also working as a team of enterprise architect that the customer has. So it is what, as a program architect, what we normally do when we start any engagement, most of the time, we usually define what is our 30, 60, 90 days plan, like depending on how long that engagement is. And that is the conversation, the first initial conversation with our exec sponsor or whoever the C-level execs who is there. So exec sponsors are the people from the client side who would actually sponsor our role, is just to clarify, and or sponsoring the entire project. So we usually have that conversation when we start and make sure that that plan is ready. And in that plan, we do refine that plan over the period of time, because we would have to have several conversations with particular people. Depending on the ask, then we move along, okay, how we are tracking around and giving those regular status reports, how we are tracking against those 30, 60, 90 days plan, or maybe 120 days, like depending again how long your engagement is. And as Swapnil already mentioned, it could be hands-on, it may not be hands-on. Like for my role, I was mostly doing is that I would, like sometimes you just go ahead and do some reviews of their existing org. Like they might have 5 orgs or 3 orgs. So you're doing some review and then giving them what is not correctly set up in the system. And that's probably the reason why you're probably having some issues. So it's like if you take that analogy of a patient and doctor, that is the always I give that analogy. Patients as any client would come in with the symptoms, they would not know what problem they have. As a program architect, we ask questions. In place of think about a doctor will ask you a lot of questions to understand what are different symptoms, and listening to the symptoms make us, okay, so these are the possible areas where you're probably having problems. So if we need to look in a bit deeper, we would look in a bit deeper through our, like, in again, those language, X-rays or MRIs or whatever, and we discover exactly what is the problem. And then give them, okay, this is the solution that you should be doing. Sometimes we support them when they're actually taking those corrective actions. Sometimes we don't. Like it again depends. Like if they don't, they have an in-house team and they can actually implement themselves all those changes that we suggested. They will go ahead and do it. And it's again, they're different, as David probably asked, like what are the week looks like and what are the challenges we face. Most of the time, the challenge is having a communication channel, right? So the most of the challenges, not technical challenge, would, as a technical architect, we are already there to have the knowledge of the system. It's more of communication which comes in as a challenge, setting up that expectation with the client and having that regular communication and telling them, okay, this is right, this is wrong, what do you need to do, what do you don't need to do. And sometimes, as you probably all know, every organization have some, some amount of dynamics or politics in there. So you have to deal with that as well. So there are obviously, we just don't deal with clients. So when we go in as a program architect, so there are other, most of the time, there will be system integrators as well. So you're not just dealing with one set of user group, you're actually dealing with multiple sets of user group. So there are big accounts wherein there will be size like Accenture, Capgemini, Deloitte, they will be there and along with clients. So you are in between them. So you are coordinating or having discussions with them. So it's most of the challenges are around that. It is not around the technical challenges. Once you reach this stage, and once you have the knowledge of the platform, technical part is probably the easiest part, I would say.
Yeah, that's really interesting to take into account that your day-to-day for a specific customer is going to be largely influenced by the set of capabilities they have inherent at their organization. So to your point, if they have a lot of developers, you may not need to do any hands-on at all. You're just advising the developers and you're providing that missing piece. It's funny because you mentioned all the different dynamics that you have to take into account and the politics. And you'll find that some organizations within that same organization, independent of the partners, you've got folks that are supporting the solution and supporting, what the architect is saying. And then you have the folks that do not want Salesforce to succeed, and they do not want the architect to succeed. And so they're kind of warring in between each other. And that's always fun to deal with. I've run into that on the project. But over to you, Anuj, if you wanted to add anything.
No, definitely. I think, again, same thing. It depends on type of project and the phase of project, right? So it could be a greenfield project, what is something like a new implementation. So if that is the case, our day in life would be going through, like if it is a new project, we are going to have workshop with the client, understanding the system landscape, things like that, creating a system design document. We usually have a team of our own developers, so we manage them, we work with them. If that's not a greenfield, this could be we call it org assessment project. So we, as Bibhu was saying, we do an org assessment where we find out that, okay, what is this org is up to, what are the limitations, what are the things it is reaching, and what are the diagnostic we need to do. So basically it depends on the project, or day-to-day life depends on if it is an Android project, it will be a different type of day-to-day activity. For sure, different clients have different, arms, like IT versus business. They always has some amount of differences. So we have to deal with them. We have to make a balance between both of them. So all this comes into picture apart from the technical skill set we do.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of get slices from each of your experiences. Appreciate that. We have a follow-up question that Michael asked, and he says, hey, Bibhu, you mentioned Capado. Or actually, I'm sorry, it was Swapnil. You mentioned Capado. What other kinds of non-Salesforce technical skills may be a good focus outside of core certifications? And he's like, DevOps, maybe middleware, ETL or extract, transform, load tools, public cloud architecture. Imagine all three of you have insights. Swapnil, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So I would focus on release management. You mentioned it all, right? ETL, middleware, and other stuff. So as far as release management is concerned, knowledge of Git is very handy. It is very easy to learn, and having that in your back pocket, you can show up as a pro person also, because Git can be very tricky. It's easy to learn, but it's very tricky. So once you know Git, you can handle and assuming that working in Salesforce, you know Salesforce metadata and typical errors there are when you deploy things between orgs. Combination of knowing Git as well as Salesforce metadata, that's a good handy tool to have. JavaScript is another one. If you are going through a development track and you are doing a lot of LWC or Lightning component work, knowing the basics of JavaScript is very important, because that takes care of so many things when you are trying to learn LWC or Lightning component. It's all basically behind the scenes. It's all JavaScript, right? So that was my struggle, because I do not come from a development background. I came as a functional consultant and learned how to develop, and directly jumping into Lightning web components or Lightning components, I struggled a lot. But then what I did was I went to basics of JavaScript, just did some Udemy courses on what is JavaScript, because it's very different than any other programming language, and that helped me a lot in understanding Lightning component and web development. And I just mentioned web development, so I just will make one more point about it. Learn basics about web development. What is a client, what is a server, what is a middleware, what is the application server, right? So I've done many interviews for technical architecture roles, and this is the question I start with, and a lot of them don't understand. They just know Apex or Lightning web components, but they don't understand what does it mean when I say web app, right? It doesn't have to be Salesforce. It could be any web app. Gmail is a web app, or any other app you use. Facebook is a web app. What are the components of it, right? What is the database layer? What is the application layer? What is the client layer? What is the MVC pattern? So these are good things to know as a technical architect.
Awesome. Thank you, Swapnil. Over to you, Anuj and Bibhu.
Go ahead, Bibhu.
Yeah, sure. As I see, the whole point is, as Swapnil obviously touched upon all the non-technical skills, how much you should know. My mantra and my motto, normally how I go about is that gather as much knowledge as you can and never stop. I did all the certifications by learning new platforms, and along with that also I go ahead. I understand when I go into a client site and saw that a lot of clients are actually now using AWS. So it doesn't have to just restrict yourself to middleware, ETL, or a particular tool. Understanding how they work is first step, and then you can understand, where do I go there? Do I really need to know MuleSoft, or do I really need to know Informatica, or whichever the tools being used in the ecosystem, or Copado for that matter, or there are so many other tools, which one do you want to understand? That's probably first your area, your interest would come in the picture, and then you would deep dive. And that's exactly how I go ahead with things. I had no idea about MuleSoft before. I had no idea about Informatica. When I came into an IT project, I saw, Informatica was being used. What does it do? How does it do? It's curiosity is the main thing. Don't kill the cat, but then curiosity is the main thing. You go with your curious mind, go in. I think one of the points, I think on the chat, I think Craig mentioned, that is a very valid point. If you're not curious about what is happening around you, so then it doesn't and the whole point that I'm trying to drive here is that you don't have to restrict yourself to a particular tool as such. Expand your horizon, understand how all the systems work with each other. Doesn't matter which middleware tool that you know, all work a very similar fashion. All the ESPs work very similar fashion. Doesn't matter which one it is. So as long as you're understanding the concept behind it, that is a good start. And then you learn whichever is interested you are.
Yeah, definitely. And one more thing to add is, I mean, this is the beauty, or you can say challenge of like technical architect role is you are come with all those new things every time you go there. Different projects, different landscapes. So every time somebody come with AWS, something MuleSoft, so you have to learn it very quickly because the client would, I mean, will not give you time. They will like consider you as be understanding, at least not like expert, but understanding of those concepts. So that actually help you as well, because you then push yourself to understand new things and learn new things. So curiosity comes into picture that time. But yeah, definitely those are areas. And if you look at that pyramid which David was showing, each and every domain there has that big block, which I think gives you understanding, like release management. Then there was like different blocks which you need to do. So this is not just specific to Salesforce. It is basically a building block of any application, irrespective of the technology. Like for example, data sharing and visibility, security of an application. Then you can see the identity. For example, we call a single sign-on, like going into from one application to another application. Like nowadays, when you say that login using Google, so this is how you log in into different application using Google credentials. So all this is something you need to like understand and go through, and this will help you in your projects basically.
Yeah, great points all. And I want to piggyback on what Anuj talked about, which is, I think, probably the most valuable skill, and Bibhu touched on it as well, isn't necessarily having this certification or having, that certification. It's learning how to learn. Right? So if you've learned how to learn, and therefore you can learn very quickly because you're going to be asked, based upon what tools the client's using, well, those are the tools you're going to be using for that project. So you better know how to use MuleSoft, you better know how to use Jira, and you're not going to know until you start the project. So if you've developed that skill to learn how to learn, then there's nothing you really can't accomplish. I want to plug one book and that I'm actually reading, and it's really great. It's called Limitless by Jim Quick, Kwik, and it's a book on learning how to learn. So if you're interested, it's an easy read. It's got things like speed reading, techniques for note taking, really fascinating stuff. So I'll throw that out as a resource. But we've got about 10 minutes left, and we've kind of been parked in the technical architect, program architect role related category. What I want to do now is shift gears a little bit, and talk about the CTA, or the Certified Technical Architect Exam. And so to start us off, for context, if you're new to the ecosystem, you may not know what the CTA exam is. Could one of you explain what the Certified Technical Architect Exam is and what importance it has within the Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, Bibhu is the best person.
Sure, I'll go ahead with it. So as a CTA, or the Certified Technical Architect, is the highest certification of Salesforce that demonstrates kind of your knowledge of entire platform. So, and when I'm talking about entire platform, there's, the breadth of it entirely. And obviously, it's a part of a live group. So there are only few, and we're proud of it. There's approximately, I think, 400 in the worldwide. And that's, you can imagine, within the Salesforce ecosystem, having just 400 CTAs, it's very few. And we are constantly trying to get more and more CTAs, trying to motivate a lot of people how to go for it. So yes, it's one of those sorts which instantly kind of sets up the credibility with your clients and peers on your capability, because as soon as you see as say you are a CTA, it makes a huge difference. And the entire thing is, it's not about the certification. When you take that journey to become a CTA, it really, really enhances your architecting skill sets and makes you a very well-rounded enterprise architect. In my opinion, I understood like so many things when I actually went through this journey. And it really enhanced my skill to become an enterprise architect. And that's probably the reason why I'm working as an enterprise architect with my client. And it gives me such ease of understanding different things and going through those pain points and solving them pain points. That's probably in a nutshell, I'll say, what CTA or what this certification is all about.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bibhu, for the context. And as a follow-up question, what are some exam tips? And it doesn't have to be necessarily for just the CTA exam. What are some architect certification exam tips in general that you would offer as kind of best practices for preparing for any one of the, be it application architect, system architect, or technical architect?
For any architecture exams, it depends on like if you are in a project or are you working or not. So if you are working, most of the learning comes from when the project you're working on. So for example, most of the project touch upon one, if not one or two, if not all of these areas. So you try to learn out of there. Obviously, there is Trailhead, there's a lot of blogs, all areas you can do hands-on. So that is something you need to drive your own pace and do the learning. But you definitely learn while you work. So I think my mantra and how I gave my, I mean, I'm at the, like, I'm an application architect and system architect. So till now, this is how I prepared myself and work towards it to learn when I on the project as well as going to other resources. Sorry.
So I have an insight on this. I did a bunch of certifications before joining Salesforce, and 2 years back, I when I joined Salesforce for 1 year, I didn't get time because I was busy with the client work. And then there was a deadline for me to finish all the remaining certs, right? And I started doing it last year. And the certification exams for the designer certification exams, the identity and access management, integration designer, they all changed, meaning they revamped it, right? So they rewrote the exams and they became much more tougher. So I failed my integration designer exam the first time I attempted it because I prepared the way I always have prepared for these exams, and I failed. And then I went back to the drawing board and saw, like, I mean, I remembered the questions, the kind of questions they were asking. They were asked in the exam. And what I did was, I just went to help.salesforce.com, and I just read through the documentation, the entire documentation on integration I could find, and that helped me crack the exam. Because the integration exam within the discussion group about this exam, there were so many discussions that bunch of people are failing this exam. And then while I went through the documentation, I also started making notes, which has helped many people pass the exam, this specific exam, right? So I would recommend, if you are confused on where to find documentation, help.salesforce.com is the best place to go. Many questions will come from there. The specific questions come from that documentation.
Great resource. Thank you, Swapnil. Over to you, Bibhu.
Yeah, as in, apart from, I think, the CTA exam, if you consider every other exam, as in we can put it into one bucket, and CTA obviously is because it has 2 stages, like you have to go into the domain architect and then go for a review board. So, and I agree to David's point of that limitless. I to be honest, I have read that book and I really, really love that book. And there is a reason why. And in nowadays, like, even if after my CTA, I give certifications and all this stuff, I just keep on piling all my certification. It's not just to pile on it. I love to read. And it is about, I don't have to spend a lot of time. To be very honest, I don't have to spend. And once you actually, that book gives a lot of tips for you. It's not about that book itself, but then that book actually gives you a lot of tips how to learn, like how you develop that attitude of learning. And you're just spending probably, let's say, an hour every day of your time, like an hour not watching Netflix and probably watching a video or studying something on Trailhead makes a huge difference. You would realize it over the period of time. And that's something obviously I've been doing for, I don't know for how long. Probably there is hardly any days when I don't do some Trailheads or not reading something about Salesforce. And again, that comes from your passion, like whether you are really passionate about what you're doing, what you're learning. The fun way of learning is there, but you really need to, any certification in Salesforce ecosystem, if you're going for, the first most important item is looking at the exam guide, which a lot of people actually don't look at. And that is very important. You have to understand the exam guide really well. That's probably I think the biggest tip that I can give you. Go into the exact exam guide, see in detail what are the things that they're asking about. And you will definitely find in the exam that is the exact points that they're actually trying to cover. So if you follow those, then definitely, you will, obviously everybody touched upon the content, and there are so many trail mixes now. Every exam has a trail mix. You go through that trail mix. I've never done those trail mixes because, I think my certificates were before the trail mixes were in place. But these trail mixes are such handy. you have curated content. It has been offered to you on a plate. You just have to sit down and eat it. Like as simple as that. You just have to spend your time. Just give time, give your conscious effort. It is not a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, great perspective. Thank you, Bibhu. I'll offer one more resource that I've used and I like quite a bit. If you've never heard of Mindmaps, Mindmaps is a way to diagram kind of your thoughts and you connect bubbles to other bubbles and relate them to each other. I'll put a link in here. It's for Simple Mind. It's a free app on iPhone. I think it's probably available on Android too. And then if you upgrade to Pro, it's like $10. You get more options. Whatever you use, there's tons of different mind maps out there. I use it like when I read books. So I'll diagram the things that I'm learning in a book, because if you write it down, it's going to stick more. When I'm doing trailheads, if I want to remember something, studying for an exam, I'll put a mind map up and kind of hit all the key concepts. And then I'll help branches out to all the different things on those concepts. You can use it for anything, checklists, for packing, for a trip, whatever. It's a great tool. So I'll throw that out there. We are just checking the time real quick. We're pretty much at time. But before we do close, I wanted to thank our awesome panel, Swapnil, Bibhu, and Anuj, for spending the past hour with us and educating us on the path to certified technical architect, as well as talking about their experiences as technical architects and as program architects. So thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
You all.
Yeah, and I also want to thank all of you for spending your time on a Wednesday evening, because obviously, all together, but if no one shows up, it's a quick panel. So thank you for spending the time here with us in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. Hope to see you next week. In the meantime, please have a safe week. Thanks, everybody.